Again, thank you all so much for being here today. I have hit the recording button, so feel free to keep your cameras on or off. I just want to welcome everyone to this space. My name is Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, and I am the Assistant Dean for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion with the College of Arts and Sciences. We are super excited for our partnership with Pamela, who is representing CU Boulder's Peace Corps recruitment efforts. So thank you, Pamela, for being here today. And we look forward to the conversation with you, Allie, and Chris. And with that, before we get started, just want to invite you all who are here today to just share a little bit about who you are in the chat if you're able to. Let us know who your name and what's your connection to CU. Are you a faculty member, staff member, a community member, a student? Let us know who you are. We want to get to know you a little bit. And so before we get started with today's conversation, I'm going to pass it over to Marisha, who's going to share a little bit more about our Q&A section. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marisha Lopez. I am the Program Manager for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the College of Arts and Sciences. I just wanted to welcome you all and invite you all to use the chat throughout this session, especially if you have a question and you don't want to lose it. Feel free to put it in there. We will have a separate Q&A session at the end, last 10 minutes or so of this session, and I will be helping with that. And so with that, I will just pass it over to Pamela now to get us started.
Great, thanks very much, Patricia and Marisa. My name is Pamela Simmons. I'm going to just share my screen really quickly here and just share a few slides before we get into our panel discussion. Here we go. I'm really excited that you're here today and that you want to learn more about the Peace Corps. The very special opportunity, I think, for folks. My name is Pamela Simmons. I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Nepal. I am also a CU Boulder grad from way back when. And as I was graduating, I picked up a Peace Corps application because they weren't online at that point in time. And carried it around for a few years, but then filled it out. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you. I am CU's Peace Corps campus recruiter. And just quickly, I have a office in the UMC in room 122. I'm happy to talk with anyone. And I'll put my contact information in the chat eventually. But right now, let's keep going. So before we introduce my panelists, I just want to really introduce what the Peace Corps is and what our mission is. The mission of Peace Corps is really to promote world peace and friendship. It's as simple as that. It's nothing more. It's not political. What we do is we have 3 strategic goals that we want to fulfill. And so Peace Corps actually partners with countries around the world. And within those countries they partner with, they really work with them to figure out where they need some extra help in their workforce, right? And so we recruit volunteers to go to be part of the workforce in a different country for a couple of years. And really, we really want to promote a better understanding of what and who Americans are. Sometimes when you read the news, I don't know if we seem very like really great people sometimes. So it's really nice to actually get to be in a community and have people get to know you and to be part of a different culture and learn about a different culture. Because our third goal is really when Peace Corps volunteers come back to the US, we really want them to share more about the countries and the culture and the people that they met and built relationships with while they were serving overseas. And so right now, Peace Corps is has partnerships with 64 countries around the world. We have active volunteers in 50 of those countries right now. And Peace Corps, I just was on the website, they're currently looking for volunteers in 23 of the countries that we're in. So, and that will continue to change. So it's really an ongoing process. And we work in several different sectors, right? So Peace Corps volunteers might work in agriculture, youth and development, work on environmental issues with the country, work on health issues, work on community economic development, and then also work in education. And I think education does account for about 40% of volunteer placement. So teaching math, science. I taught English as a second language, and I trained teachers during my second year of my service. Being a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal, I keep up with Nepal. So for example, I know Nepal right now is recruiting both education volunteers and agriculture volunteers. And the agriculture volunteers, which I think is pretty interesting, are going to be serving and working around food security issues in the country. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities. And the way for you to really see those opportunities is to actually just go to the Peace Corps website. It's peacecorps.gov. We can put that in the chat too. I'll get that in there sometime. And it just really lists the countries that Peace Corps has partnerships with, and then also the volunteer opportunities that are there. So now, kind of the reason that you've all come here is really to hear from some folks who have served in the Peace Corps. And I've got two panelists today. Chris KR and Ali Rami are here today. Chris was a volunteer in Macedonia in 2016 to 2018. Ali was in the Philippines from 2012 to 2014. When Chris joined, just a quick, and in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing now and we can highlight them because that's more fun. Let me try to do that. I'm going to spotlight them right now. There we go. Yeah, and so just to introduce, Chris was, again, a Peace Corps volunteer in Macedonia. He was a community economic development volunteer. And during his service, he created programs to teach community entrepreneurship skills. He created a college, a program to help new college grads with workplace readiness. And he actually had a workshop funded by the EU to help reduce intolerance towards the Muslim population of Europe when he was there. The picture that you saw of Chris, he had a dog there. That dog is a Macedonian native and living in Longmont now. Chris actually currently co-owns a real estate company in Austin, where he's originally from. So Chris is in Longmont too right now. So, and then Ali was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Philippines from 2012 to 2014. Ali was a public high school English teacher. And then during her service, she got involved with gender development initiatives, glow camps. She was doing some environmental sustainability projects. She actually founded the Glee Club at her high school, which that's pretty amazing. Ali is also, like myself, a CU alumna. You know, she got to have this opportunity when she was a student to do semester at sea and really sort of circumnavigate the globe, which led her to a real interest in comparative education and experiential learning. And that's all what Peace Corps is. She currently works at CU in the Education Abroad office. And here's what I'm really jealous of. Ali has been to 30 different countries across the globe. And so that's pretty amazing. Ali actually did do a TED Talk at CU, and I'm going to share the link. When I stop talking, I'll share that link also in the chat, and you should definitely check it out. It's pretty amazing. So, Ali and Chris, welcome. I'm going to start you off with an easy question, I think. Please describe your service, your living conditions, maybe some of the challenges you faced. How was it learning a new language? All of that. Why don't we start with Ali?
Sure, thanks, Pamela, for the very nice introduction. So I was an education volunteer. So I was basically a full-time English teacher at the high school. Near my house where I lived, I was actually one of the few volunteers in my batch who opted to stay living with my host family for the duration of my service. So I think now you get a choice if you want to move out on your own. But for me, that was a really great decision because that really helped me learn the language. Having little host sisters, age 5 and 7 at the time, I mean, they loved that I was even interested in learning their language. And eventually I became fluent really because I stayed with the host family and had that constant interaction almost all day, every day, practicing. And I kind of had a nice setup where I had my own nipa hut, like on their property. So I still had a little bit of privacy and could sleep in my own area, which is, I think, is maybe more common now than it used to be. I'm reflecting back because I was there over 10 years ago, which seems so crazy because in some ways it feels like yesterday, but in other ways it does feel quite a long time ago. But it was nice. I was just a 5-minute walk from my school, worked there Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. I had an amazing co-teacher, which was amazing. So part of Peace Corps is you get matched with a counterpart once on site, and they're really, your advocate there. They help you learn all the little nuances, kind of help you differentiate what may be different there in your local community compared to all of your training that you may have learned in the bigger city of whatever country you're in. And for me, a particular challenge was when we were trained in Tagalog, one of the national language of the Philippines, but then I got to my site 3 months later and they spoke a totally different language, so Bisaya or Cebuano, and they were a bit offended that I came in there speaking a different language, the language of Manila, the capital, and the elite of the North, whereas the majority of the country spoke their language, Bisaya. So that was, politically interesting and a great learning experience for me. A challenge that ended up, being great because they appreciated that I was so excited, of course, to learn their language, and the different vocabulary words and everything. But yeah, so day to day, 7 to 5 teaching English, and then I had the Glee Club was a super fun thing that I was able to work with the students. I found Filipinos in particular to be extremely proud of performing and music. They love American songs. Call Me Maybe was the biggest one at the time. So it was amazing.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'd say spending time in the Philippines myself for work, karaoke is very popular there. So I'm sure like the Glee Club was just really popular. So,
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing more about your experience and the fact that you actually had to learn a different language. Besides the language that you learned during your training. And I just want to mention the Peace Corps commitment is 2 years and 3 months. And those first 3 months, you're actually trained, right? You're trained on language and culture, and then the job that you're going to be doing. And then you serve for 2 years. So just wanted to add that so you have an idea of how long service is. Chris, what about your service?
Yeah, it's a super hard thing to describe really quickly and succinctly, so I'll try, but it's taking 2 years of this like crazy experience into bullet points. It's tough. What I tell people from like the 30,000 foot view is it was the most challenging, but also the most unique and most rewarding experience of my life. So it's everything. It was fun, and it was frustrating, and it was terrible sometimes, and it was amazing other times, and sometimes all those things all within the same hour, right? Like everything is just a constant new to you. So the two main things that people really ask me about when I talk about my experiences, they ask me like, what was Macedonia like? And then they ask me like, what did I do there, right? So in terms of what was Macedonia like, so Macedonia, if you guys don't know, if you do know, you're better at geography than 99% of the people that I meet, but it is a little landlocked country that is ex-Yugoslavia, that's surrounded by Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, Serbia. So really the heart of Eastern Europe, right? And it's very pretty. It very much looks like Colorado: mountains, lakes, rivers, lots of natural beauty. And the place that I was staffed in was called Bitola, which was the second largest city in the country. So about 20,000 people, depending on who you ask. But it was a real city. We had lots of stuff. We had a main promenade that had bars and restaurants and cafes lining the street. We had any store you really wanted. We get most of your stuff. We had Jumbo, which was kind of like their version of Target. We had a 3D movie theater. We had bars, restaurants. We had 2 pools. One was like a swimming pool. One was a pool that drained from the lake, the snow from the lake, from the mountains, excuse me. So overall, really, I had kind of a really cool setup and what people refer to as the posh core, right? Something usually that you don't think of when you think of Peace Corps, you think of people sleeping outside in places, which does happen. But we had a pretty good setup, and I just want to share two pictures real quick because I think it's always cool to give people a visual of what it was like. But hopefully you guys can see this. But this was my city. So this was the promenade. And then you have the mountains in the background. And then just from a wider view, this is what my whole city looked like. And this is how I remember it because the snow was a pretty big part of my experience. What I'll say is, like, even though it was considered posh core, like, we had our own challenges within the place. And specifically for me, one of my big challenges was the weather. I'm from Texas. I had picked some warm weather spots and I ended up getting staffed in a cold weather spot. Now you can select specifically where you go, but not when I was a volunteer. And the weather, it sounds kind of silly talking to you guys because you live in Colorado, obviously, but it was cold. And for my first year, I didn't have a heater, and no, there's no insulation in any of the buildings, right? So I'd go to bed and it'd be 45 degrees at night. You can see your breath laying in bed. I slept in a ski jacket. I would wrap my face up with a scarf so I'd poke my little nose out so I could breathe. In the heart of winter, stop bathing, take sponge baths with hot water that I boil on my stove. You would take a shower sometimes and the heater wouldn't keep up, and when you're done, the water on the wall would freeze to the wall, right? Like, it was toilet water froze. Now I'm not talking like the surface, I'm talking about the entire thing. So that was a challenge. I think, like I said, it sounds silly, but what happens, I think, at least in our country, was that you are dealing with all the other mental challenges that are happening with learning a new culture, new language, trying to get stuff done in a third world country, in a developing country, excuse me. And the cold it breaks you down physically when you're already kind of breaking down mentally, and it's just something on top of something else, right? And so that was tough for me. And I do remember a lot of times just going to work because they had a heater, right? We didn't really do that much, but they had a heater. That was awesome. So that's kind of the overview of the place. The other challenge I had with the place was the culture. The Eastern European culture can be tough, and I found it to be much tougher than what I grew up in the suburbs of Houston. The people really value kind of that strong man persona, right? Like, if you look at any pictures from people that are taken or posted on Eastern Europe, whether it's Russia or Serbia, whatever, nobody smiles, right? And I remember a story that I tell people. I was walking home from a gym, and I had made friends with somebody there, and this guy Mickey comes up to me and says, "Hey, Chris, what's wrong with Randy?" And Randy was another volunteer in the town. And I said, "Oh shit, what's going on? What's up? What's happening?" And he said, "He's always smiling and laughing." and it's a different view, right? It's a different way of operating mostly in public, right? And so that was hard to deal with, a very different public persona you had to put on. You had to be tough, and you had to be you always had to kind of be on guard to make sure that you go into the store, no one's trying to cut in front of you because they can tell you're a foreigner. Just different stuff like that, making sure that the taxi drivers don't rip you off because they can tell you're a foreigner. So that was a big thing too. That was a challenge for me, right? And I think that's part of the whole experience, is that you don't always get a culture that matches up exactly with who you are as a person. And I didn't find that in Macedonia, that I matched up exactly well with that persona. The crazy thing to me was that also, once you got out of public, though, once you got out of just the train stations and the streets and stuff like that, and just got into people's houses and had dinner with them or had a drink with them at a cafe, everyone was super lovely. So it was this weird challenge to understand, like, okay, there's a dichotomy here where you have to be one person out in public, and then you can be yourself and be nice and warm and I guess normal again in private with people that were there. So that was interesting. It was a challenge. It was different for me, and like I said, coming from Texas, where the culture is very warm and open no matter what. It was different. I'd say with work, you know, you get staffed as a community volunteer, you get staffed with one or two different organizations. Usually it's a nonprofit or a government organization, and I was staffed with both. But they really didn't do much. The NGO that I was staffed with, kind of, they were younger and just wanted to go out, hang out, and party, which is fine. But you know, I really wanted to do some cool work there. And the other organization I was staffed with was the Center of Culture, which basically just ran a movie theater. And it was cool. I mean, I got to see Marvel movies, you know, a week before they came out. I saw Avengers in 3D, which was awesome. But the fact is, like, they didn't really do that much on a daily basis, right? And so for me, what I had to realize was, if I didn't concentrate on doing secondary projects, meaning just finding people in the community that want to do stuff together, that I wasn't really going to do much. So I started a workshop to teach people entrepreneurship and basic business skills, because what happens there, a lot of people will start small businesses, but they won't do any of the work beforehand to really think things through, and then they get into a situation where, you know, it's much more than they think it's going to be. So I did that, and luckily my country director actually gave me permission to travel around the country and do those workshops. So I got to see a lot of Macedonia that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, which was really cool. And then I co-developed a program for workplace readiness for the college kids that were coming out of the university there in town. And we did things like interview skills. We did mock interviews with real HR professionals. You know, we did presentation practice where we'd give them a topic and they'd have to do it, and we do rounds of feedback, and they do another round of presentations, and we then do resume skills too, right, and help them build their resume by the time they were done. That was super fun. I had a ton of fun doing it. And I think it was really cool because I co-ran it with a local named Biljana, and Biljana really cared. She really wanted to see young people take more control of their careers. And one thing that came out that was pretty cool with it was also that all the participants ended up being female. And it wasn't like we tried to do that, it just happened. But I think that it basically empowered her a little bit to help young female Macedonians coming out of college to take even more control of their career than is traditionally done there. So that was really cool to help not only the students, but help Biljana also do something that she really cared about. And then beyond that, I basically did anything anyone asked me to do. If someone wanted help with anything, yes, let's do it. I gave presentations about what the Super Bowl was for the State Department. So like we could share our culture. I don't care about the Super Bowl whatsoever, but they asked me to do it and I said yes. And it was a cool way just to interact with the community. And funny story, I dated someone there for 2 years who was a Macedonian. I asked her one time, I was like, hey, do you know what the Super Bowl is? She said, yeah, it's a bunch of Americans punching each other in the face and then Lady Gaga sings. And I was like, that's pretty spot on. But anyway, yeah, and I think that was something that I was really proud of the work that I did there. I don't know that I changed the world, which is not the point of the Peace Corps, but it's kind of that goal to go over there and do something meaningful. And I feel like, at the very minimum, I'm proud that I made an effort to do the things that I did. And I'm glad I found some really cool people to work with that became really close partners and friends. And to this day, it's the work that I'm proudest of. And I do see that the biggest challenge for the community development volunteers in that area was the same thing that I ran into was, you don't typically find places that will have a full work schedule for you. And if that's something that you're concentrating on, it's kind of up to you to find people to work with and develop your own things and be sort of entrepreneurial and take inspiration from the things that that you're passionate about, that you're good at, and try to share that with the community around you in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it was a learning lesson, and it was really interesting to try to figure out what's gonna work in Macedonia and what's not, and just try to take a chance on developing your own program. So anyway, that was my experience. And yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. I always say that sometimes a week felt like a year. And then other times like that 2 years basically felt like 2 weeks. So definitely some challenges. You had challenges with cold. And it's interesting that you were talking that you were in the POSH Corps, but those challenges with the cold, sometimes it's just better not to have electricity or anything else that you could usually rely on. And I didn't have electricity at all, and I lived in like 120 degrees in the shade. So yeah, so definitely everybody has their own unique experiences, and that's what we're hearing here. And the other thing I just want to uplift here is that, yeah, sometimes the day-to-day work might not be the most fulfilling, but I think, like Chris said, once you get to know your community and you start working with them on some different projects, those are those secondary projects, those can become really exciting and really fulfilling during that 2 years of service. So I'm just really curious, and we'll start with Ally here. I'm really curious, Ally, did your Peace Corps experience change you? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, definitely, very much so. I, entered right after graduating from CU, not very well traveled at that time or experienced with outside of my own community, really. So after coming back, I was extremely more eco-conscious, more empathetic, more flexible, more confident. It's pretty cheesy, but it's true when people say you really grow the most when you're pushed outside of your comfort zone. And no matter which sector, which country, Peace Corps will push you out of your comfort zone in some way, one or another, and you will grow, which is amazing. And so you're kind of guaranteed personal growth automatically by starting your service. And yeah, I can echo a bit what Chris said about you. Yeah, you'll have kind of like the worst days of your life and the best days of your life, all in those 2 years. And you'll start a project, it'll fail, you'll feel terrible. And then the next day, your co-teacher or your partner at your NGO will make a funny joke and it'll make you laugh so hard and it'll make everything better, and it's just a really series of ups and downs. And so yeah, I've changed, I would like to say, much for the better after returning from my service. And really the best part for me is just having those connections on the other side of the planet. I have 2 host families that I feel strongly bonded with still over 10 years later. And so they've definitely changed me for the better too.
Thank you. How about you, Chris? Did Peace Corps change you, and in what ways?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is a lot that you want to assume about yourself, of who you are and what you can deal with and how you react in certain situations. And then I think unless you go through things that are challenging, you don't really know, right? Like you can have an idea, but I think Peace Corps just kind of helped me understand a little bit more about who I am as a person, and how I react to things, how I deal with things. Before I went, I would have created my own program and started trying to do something that was entrepreneurial. Probably not, but that was just the way I reacted, and that's where I ended up later on after going through my 2 years in Peace Corps. I ended up in 2 different universities working in their entrepreneurship departments, and that was kind of a path that started at the Peace Corps. I think the other thing that I've taken from it that is kind of inherent now is that before I went to the Peace Corps, I was doing consulting, and so I would travel every week for work, and we had a lot of travel benefits, so I would travel on my own a lot and got to see a lot of cool places. But I'd go for like a long weekend, or I'd go for at max a week and a half, because you just couldn't get away from work that long. And you get like a superficial view of different places, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. Like I had a ton of fun doing it, but I think being in the Peace Corps was really cool to understand what it's like to be somewhere and take in everything that's around you as a local, how to kind of integrate into a culture and appreciate it for what it is, and take the good, the bad, the things that you don't really connect with, but the things you do connect with, and really learn how to deal with all that, and take it for a real full experiences versus just maybe a surface level view of what a place might be. So yeah, I think that's definitely more of how I travel now is, okay, I'm going to go for a month and get an apartment and, find my little cafe, find people to hang out with, and really try to be as much of a local as I can while I'm traveling. So I think if you go and serve 2 years in a developing country, it's going to change you for sure. And I think there's going to be so many challenges that you'll adapt to, and you'll figure out who you are in a different manner. And then there's so much fun that you'll have, that you'll understand what it's like to really be a traveler and not just a visitor, right? So yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And then I'm just really curious, we'll go back to Ally. What was the most important part of your service, of the time that you spent in the Philippines?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. But if I have to say really one thing, it just comes down to the relationships that I made. And I think that's a common theme if you ask several volunteers. It is one of the third goals of the Peace Corps, right? To portray Americans in a better light, and to bring back, a portrayal of your host country nationals in a better light to Americans. And the relationships that I formed with my co-teachers, with my host family, are just so different than any other relationship I'd ever known. And I find that invaluable. And so, yeah, of course, I did the work, I taught English, I impacted some students, maybe not others. But when it comes down to the overarching, most important thing about the service, it just comes down to relationships. And not only with, the people I met in the Philippines, but other volunteers. They're some of my best friends now. And, one of them is now working at the U.S. Embassy in Mumbai. Another one is working for Action Against Hunger in New York. So it's like, that's just it's so nice to have that connection and that network of RPCVs. And selfishly, that's an important thing, right? But I would love to say the sustainability of the projects that I did, Glee Club is still happening, which I'm very proud of, but not nearly, to the extent that I wish I could support, financially, send them shirts every year, all of that. But yeah, I think important is just relationships, how, my co-teacher at that high school kind of got along with me enough. We had enough respect and a great relationship that she cared about kind of keeping that running all these years. So I think I feel proud of that and grateful that I met her.
That's great. I agree. Relationships in life are so important. And I feel like I could go anywhere and meet a returned Peace Corps volunteer. The acronym is RPCV. It's a world of acronyms. But when you meet a returned Peace Corps volunteer, there is an instant sort of connection and friendship that happens. And so I also feel like, just for my experiences, I could go around the world and probably find a place to stay with somebody just because of that 2-year experience in Nepal that I had. I'm curious, Chris, how about you? What was the most important thing about your service?
Well, I got my dog. It's my little buddy. But no, I mean, there's a lot that you really value. I value the relationships, like you guys were talking about. I'm going to Atlanta next week to go visit 2 friends from the Peace Corps that that we stay in contact with, and we do trips together all the time. the work to me was really important. I joined the Peace Corps because I love to travel and I wanted to change a career path. I was really kind of stuck in a business career path where when I wanted to be more impact based. And so I really tried hard to do something that I felt mattered when I went over there. And so I'm really proud of the work that I did. But overall, I can't really pick out individual things. To me, it's the experience, the whole thing. Like there's really not much like it around, right? Like someone saying, here, we're going to take you to a developing country. We're going to teach you the language. We're going to put you in wherever, in the middle of nowhere, and just kind of give you to the world and you find your way. Like it's really a unique thing. And that's what I really value the most, is like the good, the bad, the difficult, the fun. Like it's a thing that can't be replicated very easily. And I'm really grateful that I got to do it. I'm really grateful that it worked out, that I did it when I did it. And I definitely tend to value experiences over anything else. And this is, like I said, something that I really hold on to, as something unique and different that I'm proud to say that I did.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I will say, you have to really look at an experience like the whole experience, right? You can't focus on the good days or the bad days. It really is that whole experience. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I do think it's important that you brought your puppy home, which is pretty amazing because that doesn't often happen. And so that is one lucky pup. So that's great as well. Just one last question, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm just really curious, what opportunities did serving in the Peace Corps open up for you, like once you returned to the US?
Yeah, of course. So my story, I went into Peace Corps right after graduating, and then I was actually offered my current job a month before I was supposed to end my service. So I'm still there 10 years later, but that means I love it, right? And honestly, 10 of those, Pamela mentioned that I've traveled so much, 10 of those 30 countries were for working for the study abroad office at CU. So I think that was an amazing opportunity that I was offered at that time, and I still value it. I'm still there. I still love the work that I do. I love working with students, like I did in the Philippines, but in a different way here, college students and students interested in international volunteer work, or just studying abroad. So I know you all can come to me in the study abroad office to talk about your your plans short term before applying to the Peace Corps. And it also reminds me of the Peace Corps Prep Certificate Program, another opportunity that actually started here at CU Boulder 5 years ago. I think there's currently 150 other universities that are Peace Corps Prep Certificate partnerships. But it's really a certificate that all of you are eligible to apply for if you're interested. It basically just combines any sort of work or volunteering with a few courses in intercultural competence and DEI, and then kind of leadership savvy, we call it. Like we critique your resume and we do a mock interview, and that's basically, and then you get the certificate. So it makes you a more competitive applicant for Peace Corps service later on, if you're interested in that, but also just kind of is a great way to boost your resume. So I'm happy to meet with any of you later on about that as well. And a couple more opportunities just that I gained after Peace Corps, really just having the second language, right? Being fluent in another language. I think that's a great resume booster. I think employers are looking, honestly, like really looking in any job for people to have some sort of cross-cultural experience, able to interact with people from different backgrounds. Peace Corps gives you that automatically, by having that long-term experience. So I think, yeah, really so many opportunities, not to mention the $10,000 that you get now, and all your healthcare and everything paid for those 2 years. But I am very grateful for all of the opportunities.
Great, thank you very much. And Chris, why don't you just share briefly what opportunities did serving in the Peace Corps really open up for you, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is a little different because I was a little bit older when I went in. I think I was 37 when I started, so I'd been working for a while. But like I said, I did want to change career paths. And, after after the Peace Corps, well, during the Peace Corps, I started doing interviews, and I had a job set up before I even went home. So my experience there, the work I did took me to Harvard, and I got to work with some people there helping with social entrepreneurship programs. And then after that, that took me to Rice, and I worked in their entrepreneurship department in Houston, and help students with any sort of entrepreneurial project, but tried to focus a lot on social impact stuff. And yeah, I mean, that was direct result from my work in the Peace Corps. And I think, to Ally's point, like what employers want to see is that you can thrive in adversity and in difficult situations and be successful, and have learned lessons from it, right? And I think if you are able to voice that correctly, it's only going to help in any sort of situation where you're coming back and looking to do something. I used to work for one of the biggest consulting firms in America, and they hired a ton out of Teach for America. And same thing, right? The whole concept was like, they wanted somebody that they knew could handle stress, could be successful in different situations, and really be flexible. And I think those are all massive skills that you gain from the Peace Corps, and you can definitely voice that well in interviews, and letting people know, like, yeah, I learned a new language, I learned a new alphabet. You go to a different country and figure out how to get from one place to the next without anybody being around, without the internet, right? Like it's just a very cool skill building situation. And like I said, I think if you can voice it well, it only really helps you.
No, that's perfect. I always call Peace Corps my first master's degree, because it really is. It's all experiential learning, and I don't know. It seems like you both feel this way. Like I could do anything. Like really, you can put me in a situation, and I feel like I can figure it out. It might be hard, but I feel like I could build relationships with other people that help solve whatever it is I needed to solve. So, I mean, it did open up a lot of opportunities for me as well. I feel like it also gave me some clarity on who I was as a person and what I wanted to be doing after my service. So yeah, no, I really appreciate both of you kind of sharing more about your service and your experience. So thank you very much. We can take some questions right now. There was a question about 3 months versus 2 years. I saw in the chat as we were talking, and I just want to clarify. So the Peace Corps, the service that all three of us did is Peace Corps, which is a 2-year, 3-month commitment. And Ally mentioned, once you complete your commitment, when you come back, you do receive a $10,000 stipend just to sort of land on your feet. And when you are in country too, so we didn't work for free, but what we did work for was we made the currency of the country that we were living in relatively, and our salaries were probably relatively equal to our counterparts in those countries, maybe a little bit more we made. And then your housing is also taken care of for you. So I did want to share that as well. And then the 3-month opportunity is called Peace Corps Response. And that's really for somebody like, if Chris didn't want that 2-year experience, but he came in with a little bit more experience than a recent college grad, that Peace Corps Response opportunity would be just another opportunity to serve. And I actually know some Peace Corps volunteers who did the 2-year opportunity and then came back and worked a bit, and then went back and did a 3-month volunteer opportunity through Peace Corps Response. So those are the differences between the two programs that Peace Corps offers. Are there any questions that we can answer?
I have a question. How much of a okay, sorry. How much of a say do you have in where you're going and what program you're in? Like, does your college degree affect where you're placed, or like the kind of job that you have, or is it just kind of random?
I'll start with that. From what I understand now, it's a little bit different from when Ally and Chris were both serving, because they didn't have that choice. So they were basically, they applied They said maybe they wanted to be in education or in small economic development, community economic development, and they were matched in a country that needed that workforce. Now you can, and when I was in Peace Corps, I sort of prioritized where I wanted to go, but I had an opportunity to say I want to be serving in Asia. And then I was offered a country in Asia that I could say yes to or no to, just like any job interview, you can say yes or no to it. And so I think that was really sort of how they're doing it. They might ask you to prioritize a region. If you apply, there are a few ways that you can apply. You can apply saying, I want to go to Macedonia and I want to be working in community economic development, and that's really what I want to do. So that's one way that you can apply. Or you can say, I'm more open to going anywhere that Peace Corps needs me. I want to be working in education. So you can be a little bit more flexible. I think coming out as a new college grad too, I would say, as you're, you don't have a lot of work experience, but you do probably have some community service experience and volunteer experience. Like maybe you tutored, or which is what I did. I didn't have classroom experience before I went, but I did tutor as people learning English as a second language. So that helped bolster my application in terms of my work experience and some of the successes that I had with that. Chris, Ally, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is, so yeah, I think I was the last class that didn't get to pick where they went, so they just sent me wherever. But one thing that is important, I think, is to recognize that only certain countries have certain programs. So for example, like when I was looking to apply back in 2016, Thailand was my #1 choice, but Thailand didn't have community development back then. They only had the teaching. So it just depends on your skill set and what you want to do and which countries have those programs too. So that's something to consider as well. And I think if you go on the website, you can look at each country and they'll show you what programs they do have or don't have.
There's another question in the chat from Kylie. Can you talk about safety abroad and what that looks like?
Yeah, so again, I'll start and folks can chime in. So yeah, when you go into a country, there's actual Peace Corps office. And so that office is really is responsible for the volunteers that are there, responsible for making sure that they are safe in their post. I know that safety issues have come up in the Peace Corps in the past, and I think that the Peace Corps in the U.S., the office is really trying to create and has been creating good protocols in terms of making sure that volunteers are safe and well and healthy in their posts. And so, if there's an issue, you have somebody to go to in the country. If you're having a medical issue, you have a doctor in the country, a dentist in the country. I know I had the U.S. Embassy's physician practice. That was my doctor while I was there. I had a dentist while I was there. So all of those things are taken care of. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you definitely have like people who work for the Peace Corps who are nationals of the country where you're serving, always having your best interests in there for really anything you need. Like now there's a lot more like mental health support than there used to be. And yeah, tons and tons of resources. But really what I found and what I think several volunteers find is their best safety support is their community. Your community will really just form like a protective barrier around you for the most part. And because of those relationships, because they see you coming to their country, doing the work, putting in an effort, and the vast majority, I think, really appreciate that, and they want to look out for you and want to protect you. So I personally didn't have any sort of extreme like safety issues, even though I was in like a very, very rural area.
Yeah, for me, well, I think it's very important, first of all, to say, like, as as a male, I dealt with different issues than the female volunteers and different groups, LGBTQI groups, stuff like that. Like I definitely recognize that I have a different privilege than other volunteers. But I didn't have any issues either. I think the only thing that really ever kind of scared me a little bit was were stray dogs. In my country, there were a ton of them and they were big. And I never saw like a mean stray dog, but me and my dog, she was a puppy when I got her there, and we go up to the mountains and go for hikes and walks. And there'd be a couple times when get surrounded by a pack of 80-pound plus dogs, and it's me, my dog, and a stick. And so stuff like that. Like, you do have to recognize that you are in a developing country, and there's just different things that you're going to come in contact with. And to Ally's point, I think your host family and the people you work with, the people you get close with, really do care about you. They want you to have a good experience. They want to look out for you because they're their friend. You're your friends too. And the other thing I think is really important is language skills. And the more language the more fluent you are, the more you can understand what's happening around you and be able to also ask for help or understand, like, well, why is this happening? Or different things like that. Like, I think those are two things that you really get out of training there is, learning the language that's going to help you later on, and then how to make those relationships that are going to be there to support you if you do feel like, there is something going on.
Yep. And I would just say, trust your gut too. Like, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And so again, your community that you live in, the Peace Corps office in the country, those are folks that you can reach out to. I think we have time for like one more question.
We do have one more question. How did your eating habits change? Was that a difficult change or a delicious one?
So I was in Nepal, and I was in the southern part of Nepal where there was a lot of farming going on. And so I had the most amazing cuisine for 2 years. I ate something called dal bhat, which is basically rice and lentils. And we had fresh vegetables that were grown in the area. And I'm a meat eater, so meat was just really eaten on very special occasions. I don't like fish. I was in a landlocked country that was very lucky about that. I could not have been like on an island somewhere. It would have been very difficult for me. And so those are just some things like to keep in mind as you're also thinking like where you want to serve and where you get offered to serve. But yeah, I was lucky with the food, and it was really good.
I can share a bit of good too before I think Chris may be a bit more rough. But mine was definitely mixed as well. But part of that being because, I love seafood. So I was very grateful for all the fresh fish, but I didn't get there very often because I was living with the host family the entire duration. So the majority of things I ate were rice and pork fat. And my first host family thought they were going to give me a treat, and they're like, here's a delicious chocolate soup for dessert. And it turned out to be dinuguan, the pig blood. And they were cracking up. They laughed so hard. And I laughed later too. And it was fun. But yeah, so I really great food, like purple yam. You see like the purple Asian, potato. There's ice cream that's really great and fun and different. So a mixture of good and bad for me, for sure. So that's the question. Yeah, delicious change and a difficult change.
Yeah, I think for me it was just bread. And I'm not a big carbs person, because I'm watching my figure. I just don't eat that much bread, and everything was bread. So yeah, it was a little bit difficult, I'm not gonna lie. There's also a big drinking culture in Macedonia, which I was okay with that. But everybody made their own moonshine. So you'd go over to somebody's house to hang out, and the first thing they do is pull out a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola that's filled with moonshine. And they want to see if you can hang. And so you did a lot of eating, you did a lot of drinking. I will say that the cool thing about Macedonia, at least where I was, like, there were populations of different ethnicities. So you have like a Turkish area over here, and that had a different type of food, or there'd be an Albanian community here, and the Albanians had a different kind of food. The Macedonians had a different kind of food. So that was really cool. You basically have to find where I was. You had to find where the stuff that you liked and seek it out and try to go there more often. Because if you just ate what was around you, it ended up just being bread filled with more bread. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but I think that was the least of my challenges because yeah, I lived at home, but I had the entire first floor to myself, and I had my own kitchen. So I would just go to the market and walk around, get fresh food every day for dinner, and then come home and make my own meals. So I ended up eating at home a lot more than going out. Also, you're making $250 a month, so you're not eating out that much in the first place, right? So it was a lot of at home stuff, which was kind of cool. It was nice, and to have that sort of, that's what the locals did, right? It was like a slowing down of life where, it didn't matter. Dinner took 3 hours to make because you had nothing really to do later. So that was really kind of a cool aspect of the change of food was, instead of trying to get a meal in before my next meeting, I would just make my own food and make what I want and do it in a cool, chill manner. And that was important to me to embrace some of that sort of food culture, because it also linked to that slowing down of life and just enjoying things and taking things a little bit not as hastily as you would in America. So
Great, thank you. So we just have a couple more minutes, and I do want to show you like the latest marketing video from Peace Corps. I'm going to stop highlighting us. And then the other thing is, I just want to share, my office is in the UMC. Ooh, I want to take myself out of that spotlight too. Thank you. And my office is in the UMC, room 122. I'm in Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I'm happy to talk with anyone. My email address is peacecorps at colorado.edu. Feel free to reach out if you want to talk. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen so I can share this video and get you out of here in time. So, whoops, and my light keeps going off in my office. That does happen. Hopefully it won't happen if you're around. And let me see if I could do that. And current slide. Oh, okay, let's see. Let me get down there. There we go. And so I just want to show you this video really quickly.
Are you looking for more in this world? Are you ready to be part of something bigger? Then we are looking for you. The big-hearted, the bold, the messy and the gutsy, the teachers, the growers, the builders, the skilled, the sharers, the change makers. We need you. We are the Peace Corps. In more than 60 countries, we go all in and go all out. We are volunteers, partners, communities, working together, living together, bringing our experience, passion, and joy to building a better world. Together. We are powered by connection. We're driven by purpose. We join hands to make a difference. We open our arms, our hearts, our doors, our minds. We learn more, give more. We share freely and serve boldly. Are you ready to tackle the tough stuff? Learn more than you teach. Plant ideas and grow wise. To go the distance to make a difference. Then we have a place where you belong. Join us. The Peace Corps, going the distance to make a difference.
All right, so that's it. That is our session today. I want to really give a special thanks to Chris and to Allie. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you, Patricia, for having us. I really appreciate it. And again, happy to answer any questions anytime.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to stop the recording. If anyone wants to hang by, Pamela, Allie, and Chris will stay for a few minutes if you want to stay by.